So then we will take a look to the development tools. Then we'll see what was the first step. So creating a mock-up of this application. And then what followed the mock-up, so the actual development of the application. So everything related to UI, component, and languages. Then we'll proceed seeing how we can integrate better our application with the operating system. So let's say starting a phone call from your application, sending email, something like this. So how we can better integrate with Windows Phone. Then we need to take a look to the app lifecycle because it's not the same across these two platforms. There are a similarity, but it's not the same. And then we finally we will see how we can publish our application to the stores. So let's start with the application, the MDC client. The application that I ported is a part of a larger system that is called Mobile Data Collection. It's a platform that allows company to build and design and create their mobile application and then deliver this application over several other platforms. So let's say Android tablet, Windows Phone, iPhone, iPad, and also BlackBerry. So, and this is developed by an Italian company that is called Gulliver. So let's see what is the actual architecture of this system. So we have a web part where we can design our application using a series of widgets. And then once we have created our application, we can use our smartphone, so download the actual client. So it's a kind of virtual machine. And then, using an activation code, we can synchronize data between server and our smartphone. And then we have the app that we previously designed from the website on our smartphone. So just to give you a better introduction to the context, the app that we are talking is a native client. So we're not going to use a Titanium or PhoneGap that you were asking me before. It uses a proprietary protocol that works over HTTP in order to synchronize data between server and the smartphone. We call it occasionally connected because it has to work offline, and then once it has the connection, then synchronize with server. And then again, it has to be able to present several different widgets. So let's say widgets in order to taking a picture, taking a signature, maybe get the position of the smartphone and so on. So that is almost the context of the application. And just to give you a better idea, this is the web console. So from the top part in the application management, we can design using the application manager, the application that I told you before. So this is an example of an application. It's a series of widgets that allows you to gather information. So as you can see in the first column, you have the order of the widgets. And then in the mask type, there, you have the type of the widget that you're currently using. So the first one, you're collecting information about, let's say this was an application for salesmen. So you're gathering information about the type of customer. Then you can use also control for function. So this is an if, actually an if. So you can compose the workflow of your application. And then once you have finished, you can download to the client. So this is actually how it looks an activated client. So you have the series of applications that you have defined in the web part. Then let's say that we want to work with the last one. So just to give you a brief context, we are talking about a salesman that is visiting his customer. So, and these are the screenshots. So you have the salesman can choose if you want to pick up information from previous customer or if it is another new customer. And in this case, it can gather further information about this customer. Then you can check the product that is shown to the customer and the visit outcome, so if the proposal was accepted or not, and eventually attach some notes. So this is just to give you the context of what I ported to Windows Phone. And the first big question that we faced at that time was which Windows Phone version to support, because at that time there were two versions of Windows Phone 7 and Windows Phone 8. Well, we decided to do not support Windows Phone 7. Well, there was a clear intent from Microsoft to dismiss this platform, and also because some of the components that we needed were only available for Windows Phone 8, so we decided to go for that version. Just to give you a brief reference, the native client development for Android support the 2.3 version, just to give you an idea. Then, when we decided which platform to support, we have to take a look to the development tools available in this platform. And currently, there are two different SDK. One is for Windows Phone 7, another one is for Windows Phone 8. They are for free, so you can freely download it from Microsoft website. And also, if you're still working with Microsoft platform, you can also do Windows Phone development with all the paid version of Visual Studio. So this is just to give you a brief idea of how Visual Studio looks like. On your left, you have the visual designer of the application. Then in the center part, you have the code. And then on the right part, you have the project structure. So, well, what I found is that it's almost similar like an IntelliJ IDEA, because I developed just two basic applications with Android, and I found that you can almost you can find almost the same component across these two different IDE. So you have both code completion, an emulator, you can debug your application, and also you have in both cases a visual designer for your UI. And what I found that was more interesting is that if you're familiar with the shortcut of IntelliJ IDEA, so let's say something related to code navigation or maybe refactoring shortcuts, you can also use this kind of keyboard layout in Visual Studio, because JetBrains developed a plugin called ReSharper for Visual Studio. So maybe this could help you if you want to build your first Windows Phone application. Then this was our first big step, the mockup. We decided to build it because we needed to better understand how to port the flow of the application from Android to the modern UI of Windows Phone. And the mockup was composed by UI, control, navigation and transition between pages, but there was no logic. We didn't want to start an application. We just wanted to investigate how we can port the Android application to the Windows Phone world. And this was the result. So on the right, on your left, you have the Android application and then the Windows Phone. So this was the login for the client, and this was the main start screen of the client with all the application defined previously in the web part. Here you can see the date picker that also behave almost in the same way across the different two platforms, because you have just to scroll down and scroll up in Android and Windows Phone. Here is just a list of checkboxes that we previously seen. And these are just few text boxes in order to gather information from user. This was just to give you a brief idea of how it looks like. So as you can see, you start the application, maybe you insert some data information. Here you have text box, radio button again. Maybe you have to insert some data in text box. So this was the result of this investigation in the Windows Phone platform. And then this was the signature that we were talking about, the signature widget. So this was the result of the mockup. Once we finished to build this mockup, another important step that we have to take was to taking a closer look to the component. For component, I mean we need to port all the functionality that we previously had in Android in Windows Phone. So we needed to able to take a picture, to read barcode, QR code, NFC, get position, taking signature, show some HTML data, store data in database, because again the client was occasionally connected, and then support multi-languages. And what we have found was that in some cases we had the same library across the different two platforms. So for instance, if we are talking about barcode and QR code, we can use almost the same library, because there was a porting of the library from Java to the C#. And what was more important and interesting was that we could use the same database. That was extremely important for us because we were 100% sure that SQLite fitted to our needed. So we used just the first release of SQLite for Windows Phone, and that was extremely perfect. In some cases, we found better component in Windows Phone because for taking a picture in Android we needed to deal with canvas and path, and in Windows Phone there is a special dedicated object just to take signature, and that was good. I mean for us. After these two main steps, we needed to start developing the actual application, and so we had to deal with code. And again, this is the academic answer for the similarity between Java and C#. So they are both statically strong typed, they are both class-based and object-oriented. They are also both ensemble-interpreted, so both rely on a virtual machine. And this virtual machine also supports garbage collection. What I found in practice was that I could import Java file directly in Visual Studio and then just convert some basic types, maybe change some data structure. So instead of using vector, I used list. In some cases, I have only to adjust the name of the method, and in some other cases, I had to try to search the same functionality under other objects. So if you're talking about string tokenizer in Java, you can find the same behavior but under the string class. And but it was, again, I think that this was not the most important part of this job. Also because these two, and especially the Android application, was built using a pattern. So it uses the model view presenter pattern, and this helped us to port the same, almost the same structure of the code to the Windows Phone using a pattern that is almost, again, derived from the MVC that is called model view model. What I found different in these two situations was that in Android, the presenter was more coupled with the view, so you had to deal with the UI component inside it. And in Windows Phone instead, you could use the binding mechanism that allows you to clearly separate the UI from the logic. At the same time that we were developing this application, we have also to deal with UI, because again, we were building logic, and then we had to deal with UI. In Windows Phone, you can build UI using XAML. Again, XAML is a markup language that allows you to define UI component in Windows Phone. And again, we found a lot of similarity between Android and Windows Phone, because I mean, if you're, and you will be familiar with linear layout, you can use almost a similar component that is called stack panel in Windows Phone. We found again almost the same behavior across all the control, and also we found, for instance, that we have the same component in the case of scroll view in Android and scroll viewer in Windows Phone. We also found that the way that Android and Windows Phone deal with style was almost the same. So, talking about values in Android, you define your values using, again, XML. In Windows Phone, you have the XAML control style sheet that allows you to define, again, style that you can reuse in your UI. And here you have the example of defining the white color. So as you can see, it's pretty much the same across these two platforms. The main difference that we found, talking about UI, was that in Windows Phone, you have an associated file, C# file, to every XAML file. And that is not the same in the Android platform. And we also found that in order to access UI in Android, we have to deal with getElementById method or something like this. But we could also deal with almost the same stuff in Windows Phone using the binding mechanism. At that point, after building this application, we needed to better integrate it with the operating system. So we needed to start phone call from our application, sending email, maybe open map. In some cases we had to start navigation, show again HTML pages, and maybe open some document. Again, in Android, you normally deal to intent and activity. So for instance, if you want to start a call, you declare the intent of a call, and then you set the number that you want to dial, and then you start the related activity. In Windows Phone, there are no activity and intent, but there are tasks. So if you want to, for instance, make a phone call, then you start a task associated to the phone call, then you set the number, and then you start the associated task. Again, in Android, if you want to send an email, you have again to deal with intent and activity. And in Windows Phone, again, you have to deal with task. So there were similarity between Android and Windows Phone. I'm not saying that you will find activity and intent in Windows Phone because there are not this facility in Windows Phone. But in the case of integrating better your application with your operating system, you will find a lot of similarity between these two platforms. At the end of the development of this software, we needed to take a closer look to the app life cycle, because there are still, again, some similarity, but in that case, there are also some difference. So this is a normal cycle of an Android activity. So when you start an activity, it has been created, then it starts, and then it's resumed. Maybe at some point it could go to the paused state if it's partially visible, and then maybe it stopped, and then again, if your user switch again to that activity, maybe you have their own restart event, or maybe your activity is destroyed. In Windows Phone, it's quite similar. So you start your application in a running state. Maybe at some point your user stopped to use your application, and your application come to the dormant state. And then again, maybe if your user switch quickly to your application, it comes again to the running state. Or maybe if it stayed for some times in the dormant state, it comes to the tombstone state. And be careful, with that state, because in that state, as Microsoft states, the application context is not preserved, so you have to save your data in the state dictionary in order to recreate the application when the user comes again to your application. So in that case, you have to be able to serialize and deserialize the app state, because sometimes not all the components that you need are in the page, so you have to save it in the previously dictionary that I showed you previously. Maybe you have to rebind some dependencies, because in that case we were dealing with databases and we have to rebuild some component from scratch, reinstantiate new object. And then maybe you have to update the UI value, because maybe a user inserts some values in the UI, and then again you have to reinsert that value in order to recreate the same position in where they were previously. So this was just to give you an idea of when it comes to the tombstone state. So you start using your application, and maybe at some point your user switched to another application, and then maybe come back to your application. At that point, so when it comes again, you have to deal with the tombstone state. So you have to recreate the UI that was previously deallocated. So that was just to give you an idea that there are still some difference between Android and Windows Phone and how they deal with the app life cycle. So then, when we finished developing our application, we needed to publish that application to stores. And when you finish, or during your application in Android, you have to deal with the APK file. In Windows Phone, you have again a similar file that is called XAP that includes everything that the application needs in order to run. And the main difference here between Windows Phone and Android is that you cannot sideload your XAP file to your Windows Phone smartphone. So for instance, in Android you can download your APK file, not from a store, and then install it on your smartphone. You can't do the same in Windows Phone, because you cannot download the application from everywhere else that is not the store. But again, in stores, you're able to do what is called a private beta. So you can invite your user, and at most I think that there are 100 users. And then you can quickly have published your application to the stores. But again, this is only for beta, so after some times it expires. So you have to keep in mind. Yeah, that's the problem. I mean, with your user. Yeah, no. I mean, if you're a developer, you could do whatever you want. But I mean, talking about. Hmm? Yeah. Yeah. Now with Windows Phone 8, it's more complicated. I mean, if you're a developer, you can download it, but it's not something that you can suggest to your user. It's something a little bit difficult. And the main difference that I found between publishing application to the Android store and another one to the Windows Phone store was that in Android, you do the first step, so generating keeper, certificate, deal with Keystone, and sign and verify your signed application locally on your machine. And then you upload your file to the stores. In Windows Phone, the path is almost the same, but everything is taken in charge by the stores. So you first upload your XAP file, then the stores will take care of your file. And keep in mind it because it takes a little bit more in Windows Phone to have your application published, because it takes at least 3 days in order to have your application published. So that's why I was suggesting you previously about beta and private beta, in order to have your application published in a matter of hours. So it will be more quickly. In order to help you in doing this process, Microsoft has released a dedicated store test kit in order to allow you to run the tests that are going to be made to be applied to your application in stores directly on your machine. So it could help you in order to fast your process and avoid your application to be rejected then from the stores. And again, I kindly suggest you to take care about the tombstoning state, so you can force that state using Visual Studio. And I suggest you to test your application in that condition, because otherwise the store will test your application and will reject because it doesn't behave in the way that it has to behave. And so quick recap about what we have seen today. So we have seen the case, so the mobile application. We took a look to the development tool, and again, they are for free, so you don't have to pay if you want to develop for Windows Phone. Then we have to deal and we discover how to build a mock-up in Windows Phone, and how to deal with code and UI development. After that, we have seen how we can better integrate our application in the environment, and we have seen that we can rely on tasks. So if you want to integrate your application, you can use the tasks from the operating system. Then we saw the app lifecycle and how it is being managed in Windows Phone and how you can deal with it. And then finally we saw the difference between publishing the application in Windows Phone Store or in Google Play. The conclusion that I made after this journey was that porting code was not the most difficult task. So porting Java code to the C# world was pretty much easy. The hard part was to rebuild the UI of the application. So that's why we choose to build a mock-up in order to better understand and figure out how we could deal with the new UI of Windows Phone that is quite different from the Android one. I also suggest you to take care about the app lifecycle, because otherwise you can have, losing time publishing your application, so it will take you more than 3 days. And what I suggest more is that if you want to start building application for Windows Phone, I kindly suggest you to use a devices, because otherwise it's quite difficult to understand what your user expect from your application. So I suggest you to try to use it as your primary device in order to have a real understanding of the operating system. And thanks to Gulliver, that was the company that made this possible. And I finished it. I don't know if there are some questions.
Now that you have all your code in C# and .NET, have you given any thought, or what your thoughts about using a tool like Xamarin to then backport that code and essentially reuse it for an iOS app and an Android app?
Yeah, we have thought about it, but I mean the case was that Windows Phone was the last one to come of the client. So there was the iOS client, the Android client, so Windows Phone was the last one. I would consider that solution, but starting from Windows Phone. So you have to deal first with Windows Phone, and then you try to port in using, again, C# and Xamarin to the other platform. But that was not our case, so yeah. Any other question?
I'm rather new to the Windows Phone. I am wondering about the tombstone state that you mentioned. Is it similar like to Android or iOS? Do you have some kind of callbacks or functions when you are notified about the application going into that state that you can handle it? Is it similar more to the Android, like on pause, on resumed, or maybe it's different?
You can consider it as an on-restart event in Android. So then you have again almost the same event in your Windows Phone application. So you have been notified that your application has been resumed. And then you have the point, because the problem with that is that in Android you have the activity life cycle that is a portion of your application. But in Windows Phone you have your application. So it's a little bit complex to deal with this state, because again, you have the information when you receive the event, so what was the page that was displayed. And then you have the state dictionary where you hopefully saved your data inside. But then sometimes you have to rebuild because all your objects have been deallocated from the memory. So sometimes, again, we had the object that taken charge of the database. It was not in the page. So we need to rebuild it from scratch. But I mean, you can assume it as a on restart event in Android. It's similar. Yeah. The problem is that you comes to the stopped state and you have the state in memory. But then you have not been notified if you come to that state or for the tombstone state. So when you go to the paused state, the dormant one, you have to save everything because you don't know if you're being tombstoned or not. So that's a little bit difficult to deal with. Any other question?
I was wondering how this application is working. Do you generate the code? This application you were mentioning at the start of your presentation.
You mean the MDC, the mobile data collection?
Right.
Well, it's a complex platform. I mean, you can think about it as a series of virtual machines from different platforms, and then you design, because you actually don't code. You just connect the series of widgets, and then all these clients that are native clients, so you're not using PhoneGap and everything, then download this information about the workflow of your application, and then use a series of predefined widgets that was previously integrated with the application, and then it shows you the information. So that's particularly interesting, I mean, for companies, because you don't have to have a developer in your company in order to use it. You can just design it from the web interface and then download it to your smartphone. So yeah, it's quite complex but useful. Any other question? Okay, finish.